Welcome everyone. It is 3:45 and I would like to welcome you to this session of the National Parent Center Capacity Building Conference. We are in session 3F, answering the call for equitable practices, proven methods for outreach to Native American families. Right now you're looking at the screen on how to access the closed captioning if you need it. And at this time I'm going to switch over to the presenter slides. Our presenters today are Jen Cole. She's the Director of Parent Training and Information for PAVE, which is the Parent Training and Information Center in Washington. And Kristi Moscato is the Community Engagement Manager for the Parent Network of Western New York. And we welcome these two ladies to our presentation today, and I'd like to let them take it away and share their slides.
Okay, I'm going to pull up my slides. And just one second, make sure I'm going to share the correct screen.
And I'll just interject one quick last second. If you do have questions, please put them in the chat, and then we'll let Kristi and Jen know when there are questions in the chat, and they will field those.
Okay.
We are seeing your Whova slide, your Whova screen.
Oh, okay. Let me try that one more time. Is that better?
Yes, ma'am, you got it.
All right, thank you. All right, well, welcome everybody. If you are in this session to learn more about proven methods for outreach to Native families, you are in the right place. My name is Jen Cole. And
I am Kristi Moscato. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome. So we're going to start with a land acknowledgement. And today we honor America's first people and all elders, past, present, and emerging. And we are called on to learn and to share what we learn about the tribal history, culture, and contributions that have been suppressed in the telling of the story of America. And, just one note about land acknowledgement. This is not a colonial practice. This kind of acknowledgement is a practice that has a traditional custom dating back centuries for many Native communities and nations. And so for non-Indigenous communities, land acknowledgement is a powerful way of showing respect and honoring the Indigenous people of the lands that we work and live. And it's another way to resist the erasure of Indigenous histories and working towards an honoring of the truth. Okay. Sorry about that. And I just also want to dedicate this, Kristi and I would like to dedicate this presentation to the team of trainers that we had with the Native American Parent Technical Assistance Center from NAP, also known as NAPTech. That includes Judy Wiley, Apache, Joanne, Sebastian Morris, Sault Ste. Marie Chippewa, Mohawk, and Ojibwa, and Robin Butterfield of the Winnebago. And also to America's first people and all elders past, present, and emerging. So we'll start off by telling you a little bit more about ourselves. Kristi?
Yes, hi everybody again. So my name is Kristi Moscato, and I reside in Western New York, in the Buffalo area, for those of you who are not familiar where quite Western New York is. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and by honoring the sovereignty of the Six Nations, which were the Mohawk, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, Seneca, and Tuscarora. In this acknowledgement, I hope to demonstrate respect for the treaties that were made on these territories and remorse for the harms and mistakes of the far and recent past. And I pledge to work toward partnership with a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. As Terry stated earlier, I am the Community Engagement Manager for the Parent Network of Western New York. But I'm also the mom, I think primarily I'm the mom of a son, my son Jonah, who's 13, and my daughter Zoe, who's 14. And Zoe is the reason I do this work and why I'm so passionate in this work. And she is duly diagnosed with both developmental disabilities and mental health challenges. Jen?
Thank you, Kristi. So again, I'm Jen, and in Everett, where I reside, I am on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Tulalip tribe, successor in interest to the Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Kokomish, and other allied bands signatory to the 1855 Treaty to Point Elliott. And they and many other indigenous people are still here, surviving and thriving since time immemorial. And I honor their strength and resilience. And for all of you who have joined us, if you are a parent of a youth, child with disabilities, I also honor your strength and resilience right now. My son is 10 years old. His name is Gabriel, and he has developmental disabilities. And right now, as I speak, he is accessing specially designed instruction via the computer remotely. So fingers crossed on how that's going to go, but this is what we do as parents. We lean in, we do the work because we believe in our children and our communities. So I'm very excited to be with you today and get to share about some of the things we have been doing in Washington and in Western New York. So we have 3 objectives for you today. And it's not intended to be all inclusive. It's very hard to share everything that we know in a very short amount of time. But there are 3 things we'd like to hit on. One, we would like to just give you examples and ways to learn more about culturally appropriate best practices for collaboration with American Indian and Alaska Native nations. Secondly, we would like to just share some ideas about culturally best practices for reaching out to American Indian and Alaska Native nations. And lastly, we just want to give you the opportunity to learn more about culturally appropriate best practices for interacting. And of course, all 3 things touch each other, connect to each other. And we're hoping that you'll be able to see these things throughout the presentation as we talk about our work. So it's time for a poll. There are 3 questions for you. So I'm hoping that you'll see the poll come up. We have a great team of support, including Johan and Terry, who are going to give us technical assistance with these things. So you should see the poll. The first question, and the responses are yes, no, or maybe you don't know. Does your parent, center, agency, or organization engage in the practice of land acknowledgement? Do you know which tribes or nations that are local to your service area? And does your parent, center, agency, or organization engage in intentional activities to collaborate, to reach out, to interact? As the polls are coming in, thank you for responding. I'm just taking a peek for myself. So we have a mix of folks, those who are familiar and some who don't know, and some who are just really unsure of what their agency or their parent center has in place. Great. Thank you for taking the time. And, as we go along, if you do know whose traditional territory lands that your parent center is or your agency, feel free to add that to the chat. That'd be really interesting to see where folks are all coming from. Okay. So I'll go ahead and share the results with you all. There you go. So now you can see the responses to those 3 questions for yourselves. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing the results. And I'll close that poll for me. Okay, thank you for participating. And if you weren't able to see the poll or engage with the poll, you could also put your responses in the chat box as well. Okay, so let's just talk about those three areas really closely one more time. So this is most of these images are mine or Kristi's. That comes from our work. So this was an event that I was at, the blanket wrapping ceremony. And under the theme of collaboration, to answer the question, what is tribal sovereignty? I think for myself, as an individual who started the process a couple of years ago of unlearning some of the things that were taught to me when I was growing up, that included learning what tribal sovereignty is. And it's a very important topic for parent centers to understand this, that many of our tribes, our nations, they are sovereign unto themselves, and they have treaties and agreements with the government. And so, it's really important when you have the opportunity to learn in your area, who are the nations in your area. Okay, thank you, Gabriel. He's done with his lesson. I'll go on. Under the topic of reaching out, what could be your initial steps in reaching out? Well, we have a wonderful resource for you, and it's housed on the Center for Parent Information and Resources, also known as the CIPR. If you were able to attend last week, you had the opportunity to learn more about the Native American collection that's being housed there. If you haven't been able to check out that session, it was recorded for you. So on our own CIPR site, we have a wealth of resources that can help any individual, any parent center on their journey of learning more about what is tribal sovereignty, things to keep in mind when doing outreach, what cultural tips can help us, and how do we even start to introduce our parent center to a tribal community. And then again, this image is myself and Joy from Open Doors for Multicultural Families. As part of our state advisory panel, we did a trip out to the Lower Elwha, and we got to see their construction on their new early learning site, and that was amazing. And then under the theme of interacting, we have the opportunity to look at what activities, what events currently exist. What could we connect to very naturally? What would be very appropriate to connect to? How and where might we connect with Native youth? Are there points of contact that would be particularly useful for us in schools? Well, there absolutely is, and that's under Title VI. Do we have culturally relevant practices that sustain and deepen our work with Native families? And then, just as another thought, in the bigger picture of our parent center network, which happens to have a lot of female identifying individuals in it, are there special considerations that we might think about when we engage fathers and other significant male caregivers? It's a good thing to keep in mind. This image is actually from Skagit Valley Powwow in Mount Vernon, Washington. My son is wearing a Seahawks jersey, and next to him is my mom. And so these are events that not only are opportunities to build relationships, but they're very, very meaningful and very inclusive. And I just love when I can enjoy my work and also connect with communities in very relevant ways. And so I'm going to just take you to Washington State, and then you'll have a chance to hear from Kristi shortly. In Washington State, we have 29 federally recognized Native American tribes, and we also have others that are also fighting to be recognized as well. I would just mention the Duwamish as the first people of Seattle. They're not a federally recognized tribe, but if you do hear a lot about Washington or Seattle, that is their traditional territory. Each tribe has an elected body that oversees its governmental programs. So again, this goes back to tribal sovereignty as their own they have their own governments and councils. And it's really good to know that most tribal governments offer services for their members. That includes healthcare, education, housing, public safety, courts, transportation, cultural and economic development. And in that, I would say that in Washington State, many of our tribes are very aware of the greater community. They also serve a lot of the surrounding area too. So they're a wonderful resource, wonderful leadership in our state, and a great opportunity to learn more. And so, under collaboration, it has become an important practice for our Parent Center to engage in land acknowledgement. And especially when we are serving on different councils and committees for our state education agency or our cities or our local counties, practicing again in land acknowledgement is a really meaningful way to show respect and to prevent the erasure of history. And also, collaboration means that you're connecting with the right people. So in this picture, in this image, you can see our Region D gathering that we had. I want to say it was almost 2 years ago now. I'm losing time with COVID going on. Here you'll see pictured is Elder Connie McLeod, and she is also giving a blessing, and she's sharing about the needs of the Puyallup. The Puyallup tribe of Indians, that's where our main office is headquartered in Tacoma, Washington. All right.
Mama.
Yeah.
I get in the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. All right, so reaching out. So keeping tribal sovereignty in mind. So again, there was that image of my son and my mother and myself at a powwow. This image is showing us housing and education table at the Stillaguamish Festival of the River. And again, their festival, the Stillaguamish, attracts so many people from the community, including Native American families. So being housed there, partnering with them, sharing information and resources is a wonderful opportunity to connect with community. And one of the things that I did learn with my training from my mentors includes, making sure that how we set up our space, that it is inviting to Native families, that it signals that there is knowledge about Native families, and that I might have information that can be helpful. So that image with me and my son is just one example of that. And I utilized a lot of the NAPTAC resources. Again, I will do a plug for the SIPR because that's where it's all housed. You can access those great materials there. And then, also in reaching out, it's really important to partner to provide training on topics that are identified as important to that particular community. So that means that, being willing to be flexible and adapt presentations to meet the needs of the community is very important. And I have found that it has also made me a much better trainer to do that. Okay, I think I've got like one more slide. So interacting, family and youth engagement. So this is a sign from the Andrew Peterson Skokomish Education Center. And this was just another opportunity that one of our coordinators had to partner with the Skokomish. They already have an education center on their reservation. And so during Homework Club, we are able to go in and have IEP and 504 clinics with families, with youth. We can connect with the Title VI representative, and it's an ongoing quarterly, well, pre-COVID, it was an ongoing quarterly in-person event. And of course, now during COVID, we are working really hard to be adaptive and changing to the needs of our communities. And that includes addressing or trying to problem solve those barriers that might be related to such things like internet access. Okay, so before I hand it over to Kristi, in the chat box, if there's any ideas that were helpful, or you have ideas of your own, that because you've been doing the work in your community, where are some opportunities that you could begin or continue to sustain your work with Native American families and youth in your area? So go ahead and put that in the chat. And I might need Kristi. If you see great examples, Kristi, you might have to actually read them out because I won't be able to see the chat right now.
Yep, Don't be shy, everybody. I'm not seeing anything come in yet. Oh, here it is. Working, Lisa said, working with the Title VI program in our area. And Lisa, what area are you? Where are you from? Maryland. So working with the Title VI program in Maryland.
Okay.
Anything else? Well, if you think of something as I start, oh, here we go. Joanne is in an urban area in the Southwest, so she will check out the local Indian Center. Great.
Okay, that's great.
I did it.
Sarah said, I'm currently an office assistant admin and I'm working to compile contact information for our special education and tribal schools in our state. That's great. Well, oh, here we go. Cody is working with both the Cherokee and Choctaw tribes to invite them to their social groups and parent support groups in eastern Oklahoma. They have Cherokee and Choctaw nations in their coverage area. And then somebody's working with the Boys and Girls Club. Robin in Maine is working with the Boys and Girls Club at Micmac Education Center in Maine. That's great. We'll keep continuing to put things in there, and I'll we'll keep checking back as I begin. I'm going to just do this one last comment. Lisa from South Dakota, they present at the Lakota Educational Conference. They also go to the schools to present topics, and that's in South Dakota. And Melissa, wow, there's 23 tribes in New Mexico, and she's building partnerships and collaborations with the 23 tribes. That's great. Well, that's some great information and some great input, everybody. Thank you so much. And please continue to put things in the chat and we'll be checking it as we go on. So now we're going to look at Western New York. We're going to take a little look and you know, this is a map of the Western New York region. And the land that is now known as New York State has a rich history of First Nations people, many of whom continue to influence and play key roles in shaping our region. There are 8 federally recognized tribes in New York State. As you can see in the map there, there's Tuscarora, Seneca, Cayuga, Oneida, Onondaga, St. Regis Mohawk, which is along the St. Lawrence River near Quebec, in Quebec, Canada, the Tonawanda Band of Seneca Nations, and the Shinnecock, which is located downstate. I'm going to focus my attentions in the areas that are in the nations that are in my region. The most prominent one that I have the most interaction with is the Seneca Nation, as well as the Tuscarora Nation in Niagara County, New York. But I want to talk first about the Five Nations Wampum Belt on the next slide. Many Western New Yorkers recognize the Hiawatha Belt as a symbol of the Haudenosaunee. When I first started going onto the Seneca Nation, I used to see this in pictures, see belts. We have a Native American Community Services agency in Western New York that they have several pictures and belts, of this wampum belt. And I used to see it all over, and it always made me wonder. So I started asking some questions, and in doing research and in having my questions answered, I learned that this wampum belt is named after Hiawatha, the peacemaker's helper. And it records the time when five nations, the Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, and Mohawk, all joined together to form an alliance. So that center symbol, the Onondaga Nation, it represents the Onondaga Nation, as well as the Tree of Peace, under which the Native leaders buried their weapons of war. Then the Seneca are the keepers on the western door, and the Mohawk are the keepers on the eastern door. The very first nations in New York State did not traditionally occupy a specific tract of land, but archaeologists have confirmed that these communities tended to settle and travel within general designated areas. And I know on the Seneca Nation, the primary color we will see around on, in their community center and in their schools, they use purple, black, and white a lot, for all their community centers and in the health center and the early childhood learning center. So I just thought that was interesting and wanted to share that. So Jen, if you want to move on to the next slide, thank you. So, Jen spoke about collaboration, and I'm going to, talk about it, how it relates to my local area in Western New York. So like I mentioned before, the strongest relationship that I have is with the Seneca Nation locally. I started building that relationship extremely slowly. And I will say this a couple of times when I speak, because it's not going to happen overnight. And it does take time. I initially started by signing up to receive the weekly newsletter from the nation. I went to the website, I signed up, I get a weekly newsletter from both the Seneca Nation, one from the Tuscarora Nation, and one from the Native American Community Services Agency, that they serve a lot of the Native American families in the Buffalo area. Then I began to ask to attend different events that were occurring and show up at these events time and time and time again. That's really been key for me is when I started to be recognized by different leaders and different, people that would host those different community events and different outreach events. I knew I was getting somewhere when they remembered me and, recognized me. And, they would ask how I was doing, how my daughter was doing, how my family was, and I would do the same. But one thing I always try to do, and here comes another plug for the NAPTAC, the Native American Resources on the SIPR, is there's a really great brief that is located in the Tier 2 of the Native American Resources on the SIPR website, and it's Cultural Awareness and Connecting with Native Families. I carry this brief with me when I'm going to visit either of the nations, because I'd like to remind myself of a few key things. If you are anything like Jen and I are in our centers, you wear many hats and you're running in a lot of different directions. Obviously in a pre-COVID world and hopefully post-COVID world in the near future, we're really busy. So sometimes we need to take a step back and remind ourselves of a few key things. And the things that I have to remind myself regularly, which are found in this brief, is to make sure that I'm listening and observing more than I speak. Having casual conversations to help establish a rapport with whoever I'm speaking to, whether it be a parent or a professional or a leader. I always try to have those casual conversations. I also want to make sure I avoid a few things. I want to absolutely avoid asking intrusive questions. I want to do my best to not interrupt. I do not want to stand too close. We want to make sure that we're recognizing personal space and really try to talk slow. Don't talk too fast. And for anyone who knows me, I have to remind myself to do that because I'm from New York and I tend to talk fast. And I love at the beginning of this that Terry said, with the captioners on for us to try and talk slow. So I'm really I hope I'm not going too fast for our captioners. But those are just a few key points that I always try to remember. And I have them highlighted on the brief and will read them to myself before exiting my vehicle, just so they're fresh in my mind. And there are many, many more suggestions listed in the brief I mentioned, and I strongly suggest that you take a look at that and the entire collection found on the SIPR website. But one of my successes, first showing up again and again and again, and as a result of going slow and having the casual conversations, I met the director of the Education and Employment Center on the Seneca Nation. And I started attending the monthly meetings. And after several meetings, and in my conversations with Jackie, who is the director, I am now the co-chair of that committee of the Vocational Rehabilitation Council that I was attending, to just provide a different perspective. And we work on trainings as not just the two of us, but with other collaborative organizations that attend these meetings. We have a group locally, the Self Advocates of New York State. It's a statewide organization, and the Western New York representative attends this meeting as well. And we were in the beginning stages of planning, a job fair and a conference where I would meet with the families, the parents, and the caregivers, and she would meet with the youth about self-advocating and learning self-advocation skills. And, we're hoping to pick that up again when all of this is when things get back to a little bit of normal. But, next I want to now talk about reaching out. And we highlighted, a few of the areas, the regular meetings that I mentioned, the newsletters. I'm going to talk a little bit more about trainings and posters and flyers, expanding our networks, and the Title VI trainings for parent center staff. So, continuing to reach out, and what I do when I look at their websites, I see what's going on and what's coming up. And, if it's not a busy weekend with our family, we take a ride. It's not that far to go to, especially the Seneca Nation is only about a 20-minute drive from where we live. We'll take a ride over there. And I've brought my family to a local powwow. We've gone to different craft and art shows, and other events, just to casually walk around, get to know the community, get to know some of the leaders, see some familiar faces, and meet some new faces, start making those connections when they see me there with my family. It's just a different way, to start building that rapport with the community. And, I have then after that brought posters and flyers. If we're doing upcoming events that I'll speak about in a little bit when we're, the trainings and that we've done, our general parent network poster, I will bring those flyers and posters and ask that they be hung up in several locations. I've had them hung up at the community center, which is, it's a huge, like any community center, it's a big youth center that houses and serves not only the nation, but a lot of the surrounding communities as well, where they host sports teams. They do, basketball practices there, baseball practices there in the winter. You all know Buffalo, we can get that bad weather. So all sports teams are consistently looking for indoor facilities, and they are always welcoming and open their doors to different sports teams. The health center that's there, I've hung up our information in the health center, and I didn't I would hang, I would talk to somebody that was leading in the health center, and, that was the girl at the desk. She may have to get permission. She may have to talk to a tribal leader, but it all depends on the different entity that it was, whether it be the health center or the community center. The Early Childhood Learning Center that's on the nation, I have done several events there, and we have brought some trainings in there as well, for the professionals, for the staff, as well as for the families. We've done different training topics on the basics of understanding special education, on bullying and students with disabilities, on Title VI trainings for some of the staff that might have been brand new there. And then we also work with the surrounding school districts as well. One of the big school districts that is in the region is the Salamanca City School District. And we have a really good relationship with their director of special education. And they're very lucky that they have a Native American liaison who is also Seneca, who has been a liaison for me with getting into a lot of the different events on the nation. She's been a wealth of knowledge and has really helped bridge that gap with some of the families. But a few years ago, back in 2017, after I had completed the Native American Parent Specialist training, I had a cohort partner, Yvonne Siniscali, who was with the Long Island Advocacy Center. And I had learned from the Native American Community Services when I was at a meeting or a session, I don't remember what I was at there. And I learned that regionally, New York State has regional meetings with all the nations and tribes in the state. And it just so happened that Native American Services in Buffalo leads those regional meetings, and they schedule them. And I reached out to, I believe her first name was Lisa at the time, and I went and met with her to talk about how I could help her and how she could help, me as well be able to, bring this information to their families. And they happened to be having a regional meeting in New York City that December. So I asked her if I would be able to present at the regional meeting, and I was granted that amazing opportunity. Yvonne was located in Long Island, and I asked Yvonne to meet me, and we were amazed that we were given an hour and a half to speak to a lot of the nation's leaders. Yvonne met the tribal leader of the Shinnecock tribe. She met their chief. And, that was when I met somebody from the Tuscarora Nation and was able to start building a rapport with her, as well as there were representatives from the Oneida and the Onondaga Nation as well. And it was just a blessing and an honor to be able to be given that opportunity to speak with them and, to just share what we've learned, to share what our parent centers could offer, in support for their nations and tribes.
Kristi,
yes.
This is Jen, and I was noticing some questions.
Oh,
so
sure.
It got me thinking, because, for some individuals who are new to this, for example, like you talked about that there, specific meeting, you reached out and asked for permission to speak at that. Mm-hmm. For other events, like, I think this was a question for Lisa, from Lisa about, did you have to ask permission to attend Seneca events?
Sometimes they've reached out to me and sometimes I have reached out to them, depending what the event is. If it was just a community event, no, I would just go with my family and we would walk around casually. When it has come to different outreach events, if I saw something on a poster or on the newsletter or on the website, there's typically a contact name, and I would reach out to that contact person and ask if I could attend. At the community center in Seneca, they annually have, like a a whole day in the big gym there where it's a lot of people are looking for jobs or are looking for job skills or are looking for internships, but there's also crafters and vendors and, you know, people selling things and people just sharing information, which is what I would do. I attended one that I saw on the newsletter that this was coming up, and then I was asked to come back year after year. At the volunteer fire hall, at the fire hall on the nation, they do an annual event, and I have attended that several years. You know, and it really depends on the event. When I presented at the regional conference, it was with the Native American Services in Buffalo, where when I was meeting with Lisa there, and she told me that, you know, they have this big regional conference every year. It happened to have been in New York City, which is not close to us. It's a 8-hour drive for us from Buffalo, but I asked if I would be able to present, and she said absolutely. And you know, and it's just that building of the relationship. Attending the when I first started attending the vocational meetings, the vocational council, I met her at community events. I had met Jackie John at different community events at the community center and, you know, different outreach events. I've attended to, like, I've seen where they've done baby and toddler showers. I've attended those, you know, asked, hey, you know, are you looking for vendors to attend those? And I would come in and table at those events just to share information. But a lot of the times I've met people just at those general community events where you just talk to the vendors and just start having those casual conversations and, you know, building that rapport.
There was one more question for you, Kristi. When you were describing the belt, is the belt like representing land? There was a question from Terry.
Yep, and I will there's a really great brief on that, not on the Native American resources page, but one locally that was something that Native American Community Services shared with me. It is an actual belt made of beads. And I will share the link to that resource because it's really interesting and it's a really interesting story. And it's just so beautiful that I'll lose my train of thought if I focus on it, but I will share that brief, that link to that brief in the chat, Terry, because it really is really, really interesting. And I love the story behind it and the, you know, the Hiawatha, you know, who's the peacemaker's helper. I love that whole idea around it, but it was an actual belt that they wore made of beads.
All right, thank you, Kristi, and I'll let you get to your next slide because
this
goes, yes, and that goes right into interacting.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I did want to, you know, before that, I wanted to, before we go to interacting, but you can leave that slide up, that's fine. I just wanted to quickly talk about when I have brought some trainings into whether it be the Salamanca School District or on the nation, we really try to work as a team, utilizing that Native American liaison as well, where we will schedule several trainings throughout the course of a school year, say, and we do some of the trainings at the school, some on the nation, and some, you know, at the community center, and some at the Early Childhood Learning Center to try to meet the needs of all ages of families. So if they're, you know, elementary or preschool or early childhood families, we, you know, catch those families at the Early Childhood Learning Center. Then we get families at the middle school, high school area and elementary school, as well as families with adults living on the nation. You know, so there's some, you know, great opportunity there for collaboration for us, and we're really lucky. And after I initially completed my Native American Parent Specialist training, again, plugging the SIPR website, the webinars that they have on there are amazing. And I had the outreach staff, the current outreach staff that we had, attend, listen to those webinars to just start to get a basic understanding. And it was really a good place to start. But now when we're talking about interacting, the few key points that are on there, we want to communicate with parents consistently, and not only at parent center conferences or parent conferences. I know Jen and myself were both really lucky to attend the EPICS, Parents of Indian Children with Special Needs National Conference. When we were going through our training, we were able to go to the national conference. We spent a lot of time with our mentors learning how to present to Native American and Alaskan Native families, how to slow things down, start with basic information. We don't want to go in and start with special education law. We want to start small and build. And it was really a great opportunity. And then I was able to go last year as well. I attended the conference and was able to go just to interact with and meet more and more families. Special needs. It really was really great. So we must consistently, but that we don't want that to be the only place that we meet with them. And I know EPICS has picked their dates for their 2021 conference. And if you have the opportunity to attend, I highly suggest it. It really is a really incredible experience. We must connect with parents beyond school events. So like I was saying, those cultural and community events, and like Jen said as well, we want to reach out to parents if they haven't reached out to us. As Parent Center staff, we always share our contact information, but if we know that maybe, they're going to be at a specific event, or, they happen to bless us with their contact information, if we haven't heard from them, maybe reach out to them, in whatever way they said was a good way to reach them. We want to make sure that we're engaging them in discussion about their child or their child's interests. And a great place to start is by finding some common ground. And one thing that Judy and Joanne and Robin really instilled in me in our cohort, and I'm sure they did with Jen as well, is to always share our story. That is often a great way to connect and to begin earning that trust, with the families that you're speaking with and working with. And after you meet a family, a parent or family member, continuing that relationship building is really important. Maybe, mention an event that you're having in the area, or that you see is going on in their area that you think that they might attend, and maybe meet up with your families. That's a great way to continue that relationship. And, remind them that you're there for them for any reason, for any question. But again, remember, this will all take time. It will not happen overnight. It's taken years and a lot of relationship building, and a lot of times leaders change, and, people will change, throughout the nation. So really doing your due diligence and doing your research prior to attending and to reaching out is really important. As far as the Tuscarora Nation, that has moved a bit slower. I have attended a few community events, starting with when I met Cheyenne, her name was, at the regional meeting. She said, this is perfect. We're having a baby shower coming up. That was how I started, was by attending the baby and toddler shower that they were having. It was a great way to start. At that baby shower, I met someone from the Indian school on the Tuscarora Nation, and then they contacted me asking if they could connect a family to me. And myself and one of my coworkers, Lynn, actually went and met with a family who was in need, at the school, and, just to form that, wraparound services for that family. The school social worker was there, and the psychologist and the case manager for this young lady, and Lynn and myself were there. And, we're there to just try and support this family in any way that we can. And again, it happens slowly. It happens slowly. So I think now we are going to take another poll, but in the meantime, if you have any other questions for either Jen or myself, please put them in the chat.
All right, thank you, Kristi. And so we're going to do another poll in just a moment, kind of reflecting on what was shared in the last 25 to 30 minutes. Did you receive ideas from either Kristi or myself, or even from the chat? Ideas for best practices for collaboration, for reaching out, for interacting. And in case Kristi and I weren't clear enough, did you learn where you could get more information at where it's housed at our fingertips as parent centers? We can definitely access that information, that wealth of information on the SIPR website. So, all right. So thank you for sharing. It looks like most, yep, everybody did share. I'll go ahead and end the poll. I think I'm up to 100% on that. And I'll share the results. There you go. Thank you, everybody, for engaging with the poll. And, Kristi, before I transition to the next slide, when you were talking about sometimes leadership changes, well, often leadership changes. It can change at our parent centers, it could change at our state education agencies, it could change really quickly. So did you have some thoughts about the importance of training other staff at your parent center on these practices?
Yes, and I had that in my notes and I missed it to mention that we've been waiting and anxiously waiting for this parent center, the resources to be available with the webinars, because there is just such a wealth of knowledge and it's time. We have had some staff turnover, and more people are doing outreach now and having the pleasure of interacting with Native American families in our area, that I am going to be having everybody go through the 4 tiers on the website, and then having follow up, like having them start with tier 1, and then let's have a conversation and let's have a follow up about it. Because, I know we've mentioned it probably 10 times, but it really is, there are so many incredible resources on there, and it's just, there's so much information. And I know Judy and Joanne and Robin are available to answer questions and help anybody. I still will shoot them an email if I have a question about something or need help, or, need some assistance finding some information, because they're just such a wealth of knowledge. But training and retraining and rereading, and it's good refresher for even myself.
Absolutely. And, I think for myself, when I started, I thought a lot about this process of unlearning, just why it has been important to lean into learning about tribal sovereignty, to learn about the Indian boarding schools, to learn about treaties, because my experience has been that I wasn't taught that in my public school education. So the opportunity to engage and unlearn and relearn the history is really important. And another piece of knowledge for myself is that, it doesn't end and begin with, the Trail of Tears. Like our American Indian, Alaska Native, our indigenous communities are doing so much these days. They're highly involved in different activism, and they're, running their governments. They're doing incredible work. So it is a really great time to learn more, to partner, and because I think in that work we're going to see better outcomes for everybody. It's not just limited to American Indian Alaska Native students for sure. Okay, so let's go to some questions and answers. There's, I think we envisioned 2 ways to do this. Like if folks had questions, they could pop it into the chat. I think there's an option to unmute, but I'd have to remember that. Terry or Johan could like remind me about that. But if you do have questions for me and Kristi, we could love to field them for you.
There was one in here before that. Sarah asked if each of us could give a recommendation for how to build trust when there is trauma and conflict between races and walls of distrust built up.
All right. Well, Kristi, you got the answer to that one right off the cuff. You know, I think just in my own reflection, I think ways to build trust is, you know, actually going back to maybe unlearning and, you know, starting the process of learning again. And that goes back to deep listening and really seeing people and hearing them. And for myself, I understand this to all be actually connected in a bigger system of design that really pushes people to the fringes. And so, you know, in addition to disability, you know, there's a whole other ladder of hierarchy around this, and in my opinion, this is how people get pushed out. So if we can lean in and really see how this system works together and how that, you know, my son's liberation might actually be connected to, you know, your daughter's liberation, right? Like in this system, how can we work together differently, really listen? And the healing aspect is really important, and that, you know, I think is connected to validation as well. I don't know, Kristi, what are your thoughts?
I agree with that. And I also think really doing some inner soul searching and leaving your biases at the door, you know, like Jen said, that unteaching everything that we've learned, you know, and really taking a deep look inside yourself and taking that down and try and find that common ground, you know, is the first step, because there is trauma. And I remember I went to a seminar at the Native American Community Services, and they were talking about a lot about trauma at that. And they were, you know, they said something that was really amazing that I will never forget. And this young lady was speaking about historical trauma, and she was talking about how, you know, she had done a study or read a study on the fact that historical trauma shows up in the bloodstream of Native American and Alaskan Native families generations later. You know, and it was just really interesting. And it's, you know, we have to forget the little bit that we were taught in school, at least in my recollection personally, was a lot of it incorrect, and didn't give, or it was bits and pieces that were chosen for the curriculum and not the full picture. So really doing your research and learning all you can learn, and just find that common ground. Find that common ground anywhere, you know, you can find it.
Yep. All right, I'm just checking the chat box if there's any more questions, or if anybody wanted to unmute, you are able to do that and ask the question.
There was one here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, no, that's okay. I was just going to point out that Debbie Whitford said, in my area, there is an Indian outreach worker at the local ISD that is a go-between, if you will. Just not sure how to reach out directly, unsure of the chain of command, if you will, to make the contact.
See, I mean, I think start with a phone call, ask for a meeting, well, when you can. I mean, it's just, things are just so difficult and so hard right now. And I was, like I mentioned, the liaison at the Salamanca School District here, I was really lucky that I had the relationship with some individuals on the nation, as well as the director of special education at the school district, who introduced me, to begin building that relationship with the liaison, so I can, just be there and be invited into more meetings, or, share my contact information if somebody wants to reach out. But chances are they're not going to reach out because they don't know us, and we have to start to build that trust. So it's, coming into the school and coming into meetings, is the way to do it. I mean, what would you suggest, Jen, to initiate that initial conversation?
Mhm.
With
Yeah, I think, right. I think there's, just as I think about my community or my state, I think about the systems involved. And so, if there are specific people tasked with being liaisons, if they're a Title VI coordinator, for example, they serve a very specific role. And so then the question is, then is there a possibility to partner? Or do you even, a lot of folks even today don't know what a parent training and information center is. So we have also our own responsibility too, to like share that information as well, and with our systems partners, we have a role to play, and it's relationship building for sure. I was taking another look at the chat box. I noticed, Lisa pointed out that consistency is important. I would agree, definitely, in building trustful relationships, showing up as who you are in a consistent manner, and that you will do what you say you will do, that you follow through. Those things are absolutely important. And I see a question from JoJo about any tips for starting outreach and relationship building during the pandemic.
the pandemic has been, it's tough. Let me think about that for a second. Jen, do you have it? I mean, because it's so hard right now. I mean, I know I'm still getting the newsletter weekly. They're still putting that out. So taking a look, I mean, they're doing a lot of things via Zoom, maybe popping on to a Zoom meeting or a Zoom training. They're doing a lot of language trainings via Zoom right now, which has been pretty interesting. And I popped on and was completely lost, but it's a good way to see who's coming on, who's going to the Zooms, who's still, trying there. That might be a good place to see if you go to the website or go see if they have a newsletter sign up. Just start taking a look to see, because more and more things are slowly beginning to happen outside, at least in our region. I know there were a couple of like farmers markets near the end of the summer around here. And there was one on the nation that I saw that they were doing in the parking lot of the community center one weekend. Maybe, starting to see if there's things, and just start reaching out if there's a training or a session going on and it has a contact information out. Start with the basics of, like Jen just said, what is a parent center? What is a parent training and information center? And what can we do to help? And remembering to not be the know-it-all. We don't want to push our beliefs and ourselves on them. It does have to go slow, but just, we're here if you need us, maybe kind of attitude. This information is here. Maybe offer some remote learning support for families if you're able to do that, or your agency is able to provide that, which could be a barrier breaker downer, if to help those families, because we all know we're all struggling with that right now.
for sure. I noticed a couple more questions popped up. And before I get to Robin's question, I noticed Lisa was wondering about tribes having websites and where should we learn about leadership or governance policies. I mean, that's definitely a place to begin with. If I think about any government that I would be interested in learning more about, many tribes and nations have their website that talks about the history of their people, who are their division leads and all of that. It's a good place to get information and, like, to your point, Kristi, get signed up for a newsletter and learn more. Many also contribute to the larger community too, and so they're doing amazing things as we speak. Robin's question was about a recommendation of who the first point of contact should be in the community, because she works with 4 different Native communities. And although she's been invited to different events and to have tables, it's difficult for her center to get information out to families. Do you have thoughts about that, Kristi? And you might be muted.
Oops, sorry, I was muted.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'll have to. I was looking up the Seneca Nation's web. I was getting the link for the Seneca Nation website to put up there just so you could take a look to see the type of information that is on there. But Joanne's was. So I'm sorry. I have to reread the question because I was typing. Sorry. The newsletter. See if there's a local tribe. Oh, I love Joanne's suggestion.
Yes, which is finding out if there's local tribal radio or television, for sure. Yes. My local internet provider, their cable, they have a whole station devoted to Indigenous communities, and it's amazing. Different nations, different tribes produce shows. I mean, just like any other government, they're producing shows for kids, informational shows, drama, funny stuff. It's really cool.
And Robin, I apologize for that. My response to your question was the first place I started was in the education and training department. If you look at the website, you can see all the different departments. That was where I started way back when, several years ago. And, that just began conversations and began the initial, I started first with the newsletters and the website, and then asking to attend, different outreach events that they had if they were looking for vendors. And then, but then after I was on the Nation a few times and I felt a little bit more comfortable, I reached out to the education and training department. That was where I began. But everybody is going to have their own comfort level and see what the departments are and where you can find the most common ground, and commonality. That might be the best place for you to start. Hi, Gabriel.
Just popping in, his class is done. Yes, so I'm just doing a time check. We just have, maybe a few more minutes. If there aren't any more questions, we'd love to share some additional information of how you can connect with us, because this work really requires for us to connect and collaborate. And so through the work of the Native American Parent Technical Assistance Center, they developed a really great cohort of parent center leaders who receive training and mentorship from them. And so we are definitely resources for you to connect with. That includes PAVE, Washington PAVE, Kristi's Parent Network of Western New York, EPU, Children's Center, California, Raising Special Kids, Arizona, PATH Project, that's Texas, South Dakota Parent Connection, Task in California, and then Ethics, of course, in New Mexico. So we are out there, and we're we love this work. We're very passionate about it. We'd love to connect with you if you would like more discussion, more ideas. And of course, we'll also want to connect you back to the SIPR site to access all of the wonderful training materials that were developed by the NAPTAC team that is so relevant. You know, it's always been relevant, and I think from my perspective, even more so than ever, if we're going to entertain any conversation about equity, equitable practices, if we're going to do a deeper dive into the examination of the history of our country and how we got to where we are today, it's all there.
And they update their resources, you know, when updates are needed. So know that you will get the most current information found on, you know, in their resources.
Absolutely. And I think lastly, you know, Kristi and I came together and envisioned this presentation months ago, and then it was here all of a sudden. And I think, you know, we both lift our hands in gratitude to our mentors, you know, Judy, Robin, and Joanne, and then also our colleagues who participated in these learning experiences with us. It was amazing. And we also lift our hands to all of you who are in the work right now. It's really challenging, of course, and you're showing up and you're leaning in and wanting to learn more. And so we just connect with you. We appreciate you. We see you. We feel you for sure as parents ourselves. And anything you want to say, Kristi?
No, just thank everybody. You know, thank you all for joining. And again, you know, I second everything that Jen just said, and we're so grateful that we were given this opportunity to, you know, learn from the wonderful leaders and women that we learned from, who were just so thoughtful in their training. The whole thing, and we're grateful for you. You know, please let us know if you have questions. You know, we are around and available to support you in any way that we can. And if we don't know the answers, if I don't, I know I'll call Judy or Joanne. So call us.
Yes.
But thank you all very much.
This is Johan Mora, and I just want to thank the presenters. I'm sure you can see in the chat, our participants are also thanking you definitely for your time, and not only your time, but your effort. It's always great to be here in support of such wonderful and knowledgeable presenters. I just want to take this moment to let everybody know. If not, I think I'm actually going to turn it over to Terry. She is best on this when it comes to the Whova app. Terry, do you have any remarks you want to mention regarding the app and the presentation?
Yes, thank you, Johan, and thank you to Kristi and Jen. We really appreciate all of your work that went into this. And I love these pictures because I see some of my colleagues and former colleagues. So it's a little blast from the past of people in Region B. But I wanted to remind everyone to please fill out our session feedback. We are session 3F, answering the call for equitable practices. And if you're in the web app, you will just need to go to survey and then session feedback and find this session. Again, it's 3F. And if you're in the mobile app, again, you just need to go into there's a section that says additional resources, and there's a little button that says survey, and again, session feedback. So session 3F, and we really appreciate the feedback. It helps us to further provide additional TA later on in as we do. And again, thank you all for joining us. We really can't do this without you, and this has been a really incredibly impressive turnout. We had 750 people register for the conference.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Are there any final questions as we head into this last minute? If not, I know Johan will turn us off and close out our room for us. Oh, and one last thing, we are recording these sessions and it just takes us a couple of days to get them all uploaded. So be patient, but the ones from last week are available. They're both in the Whova app, and there was a Google folder that went out today in an email from Deborah Jennings through the SIPR.